"Get off the stage, old man. You're embarrassing us." Those words didn't come from a stranger. They came from my own daughter, Vanessa, into the microphone under the golden chandeliers of the Denver Country Club ballroom. Hundreds of guests turned their heads, executives in tuxedos, investors in designer gowns, journalists scribbling notes. The 50th anniversary of my construction company, the empire I had poured every bone and drop of sweat into, had become the stage for my humiliation. My name is Lawrence Aldridge, and I am 72 years old. For nearly half a century, I built Aldridge Construction with my own hands, starting from a pickup truck, a toolbox, and a dream. I raised skyscrapers that touched the Denver skyline bridges, that carried families across rushing rivers, schools where children now sit and learn. At one point, we employed over 500 men and women. That was my life's work. I thought tonight would be a celebration of that journey, a moment to honor not just me, but everyone who believed in what we built. Instead, my daughter and later my son Nathan made it clear I was nothing but a relic, a burden to their image of modern success. I stood there in my tailored Navy suit, the same one I wore when signing million-dollar contracts. My hands, lined with years of labor, tightened around the edge of the podium. Behind me, the banner read, "Celebrating 50 years of excellence." In front of me, the faces of Denver's elite blurred into one wall of pity and amusement. Vanessa's green eyes, so much like her mother's, but colder, flashed with irritation. Nathan tugged her sleeve as if to hush her, but he didn't meet my gaze either. Can you imagine at 72 being told by your own children to sit down, to stop embarrassing them on the very stage you built with your blood? I want to pause here and ask you, have you ever been humiliated by the very people you sacrificed everything for? Before I tell you how I turn this pain into power, please subscribe to this channel and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how many of you out there have felt the sting of family betrayal. Because betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those you love most. I looked out over the ballroom one last time that evening, my company's legacy hanging in the air like smoke. The imported Italian chandeliers, the marble floor polished to a mirror, shine the $100 plates of steak and lobster, all of it had been paid for by me. Yet there I stood, an unwanted guest at my own celebration. Vanessa whispered into the microphone again, softer now, but still cutting. "Please, Dad, let the younger generation speak. You've had your time, my time." That phrase hit harder than any fall or broken bone I ever suffered on a construction site. My time. As if the decades I spent working 16-hour days, mortgaging my future, paying for Vanessa's Ivy League degree, Nathan's Stanford MBA, the down payments on their Cherry Creek mansions, none of it mattered anymore. I stepped down from the podium, the applause half-hearted, polite like clapping for a tired performer who'd overstayed his act. I carried with me not just shame, but a dawning clarity. This wasn't an accident. This was calculated. My children had been preparing to push me aside, to erase me from the very legacy I had created. I smiled for the cameras that night, but inside something broke. Or perhaps something woke. And that awakening, as you'll see, would change everything. The limousine ride back to my estate in Cherry Hills should have felt triumphant. After all, the event had been meant to honor me, the founder, the builder, the man whose name was carved into Denver's skyline. But as the city lights slid past the tinted windows, all I saw was the reflection of an old man in a navy suit, his tie still knotted, but his dignity unraveling. When I stepped into my foyer that night, the silence hit me harder than Vanessa's words had. My wife Margaret had passed 10 years earlier, leaving the mansion echoing with only memories. I poured myself a scotch and sat beneath the oil portrait she had insisted we commission her eyes, kind and steady even in paint. "Margaret," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You warned me, didn't you? You said don't spoil them too much, Lawrence. They need to learn to stand on their own." Back then, I had laughed. What harm was there in paying Vanessa's $280,000 Harvard tuition in covering Nathan's $200,000 Stanford MBA? In writing a $400,000 check so they could each move into gleaming new homes before they turned 30, I thought I was buying their futures, buying their happiness. But you cannot purchase respect. I walked through the halls of my home, the marble floors imported from Italy, the Persian rugs I had shipped from Istanbul. Every corner screamed wealth, yet the air felt empty. Wealth had built this palace, but faith had been the mortar that once held my family together. I found myself standing in my study, where Margaret's Bible still sat on the shelf. I hadn't opened it in months. My fingers traced the cracked leather cover before flipping to a page she had bookmarked long ago. "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul?" I sat down heavily in the leather chair and let the words settle over me. Perhaps God had allowed tonight to happen not to humiliate me, but to reveal the truth I had refused to see. Maybe this humiliation was not the end, but the beginning of clarity. I remembered Vanessa's face under the ballroom lights. Perfect makeup, diamond earrings I had paid for her designer gown, glittering under chandeliers I had installed. And yet her words were ice. "Get off the stage, old man." Nathan stood beside her, silent, complicit, tugging at his collar like a boy caught in a lie. They weren't embarrassed by me. They were embarrassed of me. I looked around my study at the photographs lining the shelves. Vanessa at age 5 in a ballerina costume, Nathan holding his first baseball bat. Family vacations to Aspen and Maui weddings where I wrote 6-figure checks to ensure perfection. Smiles captured in glossy frames. But now I wondered, were they genuine smiles or rehearsed performances for the man holding the checkbook? The scotch burned down my throat, but not enough to numb the sting. I reached for my journal, the one Margaret had given me for our 25th anniversary. On the first page in her handwriting were the words, "When you feel lost, write until you find yourself again." So I wrote. Tonight, my own daughter told me I was irrelevant. My son agreed in silence. They see me as an old man with nothing left to offer but money. But maybe this is God's way of reminding me I was never meant to be their banker. I was meant to be their father. And if they no longer want that, then perhaps it's time to stop financing their illusions. I closed the journal and leaned back. A strange calm settled over me like the eye of a storm. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about how to rescue them, how to pay their bills, how to shield them from consequences. Instead, I thought of what Margaret would say if she were here. She would take my hand, look me straight in the eye, and say, "Lawrence, you did your duty as a father. But now let them walk on their own legs. God has carried you this far. Trust Him to carry you further." I turned off the desk lamp and let the room fall into darkness, save for the faint glow of Denver's skyline through the window. The same skyline I had helped build brick by brick, steel by steel. That was my legacy, not the ingratitude of spoiled children, But the enduring structures that would stand long after tonight's insult was forgotten. And somewhere deep inside, a seed of resolve began to grow. Tomorrow, I promised myself, I would begin to look at everything differently. Not as a father desperate for approval, but as a man reclaiming his dignity. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Years of running construction sites had wired me to rise early long before the city stirred. But this morning felt different. My hands weren't reaching for blueprints or contracts. They reached for the filing cabinet in my study, the one marked Family Financial Records. I pulled out folder after folder, mortgage agreements, tuition receipts, business contracts, where my name appeared as guarantor. Dust floated in the air as the stacks grew taller on my mahogany desk. For decades, I had treated this paperwork as proof of love, evidence of sacrifice. But now, under the gray morning light, they looked like chains I had forged for myself. Vanessa's Ivy League tuition, $287,000. Nathan's Stanford MBA, $221,000. Vanessa's $400,000 Cherry Creek home down payment. Nathan's $380,000 Boulder property secured with my signature. Luxury cars leased under my name. Credit cards where I was the guarantor. Insurance policies paid directly from my accounts. The numbers piled higher and higher until I felt sick. Over $1.3 million funneled into their dreams. Dreams I realized that were never meant to include me. As I sat there, a memory surfaced. Margaret's voice again softer now from years ago. Lawrence's generosity is noble, but too much generosity can cripple. One day they must learn to stand. I had nodded back then, but the very next week I wrote another check. I turned to my computer and opened my email archives, searching for any sign of gratitude, any reminder that I hadn't been entirely blind. What I found instead made my jaw tighten. There it was, an email forwarded accidentally from Vanessa to Nathan, dated just 3 weeks earlier. The subject line, investor dinner talking points. The words on the screen cut deeper than her insult on the ballroom stage. Don't worry about Dad. He's old, predictable, and his money is always behind us. Investors don't need to see him. He drags the image down. We'll handle the speeches. He'll write the checks. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse pounding in my ears. So it wasn't just arrogance. It was strategy. They had already decided I was nothing more than a walking wallet, an inconvenient relic to be hidden in the shadows, while they paraded in front of investors with my money behind them. I printed the email, the paper still warm in my hand, and pinned it to my corkboard beside invoices and contracts. Evidence, not of love, but of betrayal. Rummaging deeper, I found loan agreements I'd co-signed for Nathan's consultancy firm. $150,000 still outstanding, guaranteed by my assets. I called my banker to verify, pretending calm. Yes, Mr. Aldridge. The representative confirmed. As guarantor, you are legally responsible should the primary borrower default. At present, repayment has been inconsistent. In fact, the last 3 months were covered only after transfers from an auxiliary account yours. The words landed like hammer blows. So Nathan's independence, his proud consulting empire, had been nothing more than a facade built on my quiet bailouts. I thanked the banker and hung up, staring out at the Rocky Mountains glowing pink with sunrise. My children had not just humiliated me. They had built their entire lives on illusions funded by me. For years, I had told myself I was giving them a better start, sparing them the hardships I had endured, long days, pouring concrete, frozen mornings at construction sites, aching muscles that never quite recovered. But in shielding them from every consequence, I had robbed them of resilience. And now they despised me for it. I pulled out another file labeled trusts. Inside were the documents for my grandchildren's education funds. $600,000 spread across 4 accounts, carefully built over years of monthly deposits. Each account bore my name as trustee, giving me the authority to freeze or dissolve them. I stared at those documents for a long time. My grandchildren, innocent. Could I punish them for the sins of their parents? My stomach churned. Yet even here I found dishonesty. Notes scribbled in Nathan's hand, plans to reallocate the funds temporarily to keep his business afloat. They were already circling like vultures around their children's futures. By mid-morning, my mahogany desk looked like a crime scene, photographs of smiling faces beside cold numbers, thank you cards, beside debt statements, a family album rewritten in dollars and signatures. I felt the weight of every mistake pressing down. But mingled with the grief came something else: clarity. This wasn't just about humiliation at a ballroom. This was about 30 years of exploitation dressed as family obligation. And that morning, with the Rockies rising in the distance, I made a quiet vow. If my children wanted independence from me emotionally, they would have it financially as well. By noon, the piles of paperwork on my desk looked less like family records and more like the blueprint of a trap I had built for myself. Every canceled check, every co-signed loan, every emergency transfer was a brick in a prison I had willingly stepped into. I stood at the window of my study, the Denver skyline glittering in the spring sunlight. My towers still stood proud steel and glass monuments to a lifetime of work. And yet my own children thought I had nothing meaningful to show for it. Their words from the ballroom rang in my head. "Get off the stage, old man." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Maybe they were right about one thing: I had been on stage too long, not as a man, but as a benefactor. I had played the part of the endless provider, the safety net, the man who could always be counted on to fix everything. That role ended now. I picked up the phone and dialed my attorney, Richard Grant. His voice came on brisk and professional. "Lawrence, it's been a while. What can I do for you?" "Richard," I said, steadying my tone. "I need a comprehensive review of every financial arrangement where my children are involved. Mortgages, trusts, business loans, insurance policies, every last thread." There was a pause on the line. "That sounds serious. Are you sure you want to open that door?" "I don't just want to open it," I replied. "I want to slam it shut." Next, I called Margaret, my accountant of 20 years, a woman who had seen every detail of my fortune. "Margaret, I need you to pull every ledger tied to Vanessa and Nathan. Credit cards, insurance, anything. And prepare projections for what happens if I withdraw my name completely." She hesitated. "Lawrence, are you planning to cut them off?" I looked down at the email still pinned to my corkboard. "Don't worry about Dad. He's predictable. His money is always behind us. I'm planning to give them exactly what they asked for," I said. Independence. When I hung up, a strange calm filled the room. The same calm I'd felt before sealing a multi-million-dollar contract, before stepping into a negotiation where I knew the other side underestimated me. I poured myself a black coffee stronger than scotch and opened a fresh, yellow legal pad. At the top, I wrote in block letters, "Financial Independence Project." Underneath, I began to list every lifeline I'd created. Vanessa mortgage guarantee $400,000. Vanessa credit cards, 3 accounts, $92,000 outstanding. Nathan business loan, $150,000 guaranteed by me. Nathan luxury car lease tied to my credit line. Both family insurance policies bundled under my plan. Trust funds, grandchildren's college savings, $600,000. Beside each item, I drew arrows pointing to possible outcomes: foreclosure, repossession, loss of coverage. Cold, clinical, unfeeling. For once, I treated them not as children, but as clients who had defaulted on every contract of respect. For 30 years, I had taught them that money erased consequences. Now I would teach them the opposite lesson. Consequences arrive the moment the money disappears. I closed my journal, the one Margaret had given me years ago, and wrote a single line at the bottom of today's page. If they don't want me as a father, they won't have me as a banker. Leaning back in my chair, I spoke aloud into the empty room, the sound carrying like a verdict. Tomorrow I begin the withdrawals. They'll see what life without me actually looks like. For the first time in years, I felt my shoulders lighten. The burden of endless giving, endless rescuing, was beginning to fall away. I want to pause here and ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have the courage to finally cut them off? If you're still listening with me to this point, press 1 in the comments, so I know you understand this pain. Because tomorrow, the man my children thought was predictable was about to become their worst surprise. The morning after my decision, I felt sharper than I had in years. For decades, I had moved through life like a father carrying a heavy load, every stumble of my children instantly shouldered by me. But now I was moving like the man I used to be, the builder, the strategist, the one who looked at a vacant lot and saw a skyscraper rising where others only saw dirt. I brewed my coffee, strong black as tar, and carried it into my study. The yellow legal pad lay open on the desk, waiting for my next move. I began drawing columns just like I used to draft timelines for massive construction projects. Only this time the structure wasn't made of steel or concrete. It was the dismantling of financial illusions. Column 1, dependency. Column 2, amount. Column 3, legal authority to withdraw. Column 4, projected fallout. It looked less like family finances and more like a battlefield map. I started with Vanessa. She had always been the image-conscious one, obsessed with appearances. Her mortgage guarantee of $400,000 was the anchor of her lifestyle. Without it, the bank would come knocking, demanding she qualify on her own. Given her debt-to-income ratio, credit cards at 92,000, boutique shopping habits that would shame a Hollywood starlet, she didn't stand a chance. The fallout, foreclosure, or a humiliating downsizing. Next, her credit cards. I had guaranteed 3 accounts, each one treated like her personal fountain of endless champagne. Terminating my guarantee would instantly reduce her limit to whatever she could qualify for independently. I pictured her face the first time a platinum card was declined at one of her charity luncheons. That moment alone would undo decades of her cultivated social mask. Then Nathan. My son's empire, his so-called consulting firm, was little more than a sandcastle propped up by the tide of my backing. The $150,000 business loan bore my signature as guarantor. Without me, the bank would call in obligations faster than he could pour coffee for his clients. His luxury car lease, too, was tethered to my credit line. I smiled grimly, imagining him returning the gleaming BMW that he boasted about as self-made success. And then there were the trust funds, my grandchildren's future. That one hurt. $600,000 set aside for education, for opportunities I never had. But even here, betrayal had crept in. Nathan's handwritten notes about borrowing from the funds to keep his business afloat showed just how little sacred ground remained. If I froze the accounts, the children would still have their future someday. But for now, their parents would have to explain why the river of free-flowing money had run dry. I listed insurance policies, next health, auto, even the country club membership fees that quietly renewed each year through my accounts. Every item became another domino lined up on the desk, ready for the push. By mid-morning, the plan looked clinical, almost elegant. Step 1, cancel credit guarantees. Step 2, terminate business loan backing. Step 3, withdraw mortgage guarantees. Step 4, freeze trust funds. Step 5, dismantle every remaining perk that cushioned their lifestyles. It wasn't rage guiding me. Rage would have burned me out long ago. This was precision. A lifetime of project management now applied to a different kind of construction, rebuilding my own dignity. I called my assistant Paul, a man who had worked for me faithfully for 15 years. Paul, starting today, I want you to screen every call from Vanessa and Nathan. If they show up at the office, alert security before they come upstairs. He hesitated, surprised. Of course, Mr. Aldridge. May I ask, is everything all right? I looked out at the Rockies rising like immovable giants. Everything is better than all right. For the first time in years, I'm building something that matters, myself. After hanging up, I allowed myself a rare smile. I could already imagine the ripples. Vanessa at a boutique card declined. Nathan, in his glass office phone, pressed to his ear as the banker explained that his guarantor had vanished. Their carefully curated lives built on the illusion of independence crumbling in real time. But this wasn't about cruelty. This was about justice. They had stood in front of Denver's elite and told me my time was over. Very well, let them see how much of their time had been purchased by my money. The afternoon sun spilled across my desk as I stacked the folders into neat piles, each one marked with bold red tabs: terminate, freeze, cancel, withdraw. It struck me then how familiar the rhythm felt. When I was younger, I used to stand on construction sites shouting commands, orchestrating cranes, trucks, and crews with flawless timing. Now I was orchestrating a demolition not of buildings, but of illusions. And tomorrow, the first hammer would fall. The next morning, I didn't reach for my scotch. I reached for the phone. At exactly 9:00 a.m., I dialed the first number on my list, Vanessa's primary credit card company. A cheerful representative answered. Good morning, Mr. Aldridge. How can we assist you today? My name is Lawrence Aldridge, I said firmly. I am guarantor on account ending 9221. Effective immediately, I want to withdraw my guarantee. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause that happens when someone realizes they're about to watch an avalanche fall. Sir, you should know that this will reduce the primary cardholder's limit substantially, and any balance over her independent credit capacity will require immediate payment. That's exactly the point, I replied. Within minutes, the account that had financed Vanessa's designer gowns, spa weekends, and charity gala tickets crumbled. I imagined her at some upscale lunch ordering champagne with her friends, only to be told her card had been declined. For the first time in her adult life, she would taste the sourness of the word no. Next came Nathan's business loan. I called the bank directly. This is Lawrence Aldridge, guarantor on loan 44827. I'm exercising my right to terminate guarantee obligations effective today. The banker cleared his throat. Sir, this will place the business in immediate jeopardy. Payroll vendor payments. Then perhaps he'll finally run a business that pays for itself, I interrupted. By noon, I had canceled 3 of Vanessa's credit cards, terminated Nathan's business guarantee, and called the insurance company to remove both children from every policy tied to my accounts. Health, auto, dental, all of it gone. The silence of my study was punctuated only by the scratch of my pen as I checked each item off my yellow legal pad. Each check mark was like removing a tumor that had been draining me for decades. I paused, leaning back in my chair, and for the first time in years, I opened Margaret's Bible again. The verse from Proverbs caught my eye. Discipline your children, for in that there is hope. Do not be a willing party to their death. I whispered into the empty room. Lord, give me the strength to keep going. I know they'll come begging. I know the tears will flow. But let me stand firm. Let me show them that love isn't money without end. Let me believe this is your justice, not my revenge. The phone buzzed. Vanessa's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Seconds later, a text appeared. Dad, my card was declined. The restaurant is saying the account's been closed. Call me now. This must be a mistake. I placed the phone face down. Another call came almost immediately, Nathan this time. I listened to his voicemail later, his voice trembling in panic. Dad, what's happening? The bank says you canceled the guarantee. I have payroll tomorrow. Please don't do this. Call me back. I didn't, and instead, I dialed the country club, where I had maintained memberships for both of them. This is Lawrence Aldridge. Please terminate the memberships under accounts 3321 and 4482 effective today. The manager stammered. Mr. Aldridge, are you sure these memberships have been active? For I'm sure. They no longer represent me. I hung up and crossed out another line on the pad. By 3:00 p.m., my children's world had shifted from silk cushions to hard ground. Their lifelines, financial and social, had been severed not by accident, but by precision, and still I wasn't done. I opened the folder labeled Trust Funds. My grandchildren's future, $600,000 carefully set aside. My hand trembled as I held the papers. They were innocent, but I couldn't allow those funds to be used as collateral for lies. I called the trustee bank. This is Lawrence Aldridge. I want to freeze distributions on accounts 7713 through 76. Effective immediately. The representative hesitated. Sir, the beneficiaries are your grandchildren. Are you certain they'll thank me one day? I said softly. When their parents learn to stand on their own 2 feet. As the sun dipped behind the Rockies, the last call was made, the last account frozen, the last guarantee erased. I closed the binder and sat back exhausted, but strangely renewed. My phone vibrated again, voicemail after voicemail, some angry, some desperate, some dripping with entitlement. But I no longer felt pulled by them. I felt free. I walked out to my back patio, where the evening air carried the scent of pine. I tilted my head back toward the sky streaked with violet clouds and whispered, Maybe, Lord, you closed these doors so that I could finally walk through the one that leads to peace. Tomorrow I knew the real storm would begin, confrontations, accusations, crocodile tears. But tonight, in the quiet of my estate, I felt stronger than I had in decades. because for the first time in my life I wasn't paying to be loved. The storm came faster than I expected. By Thursday afternoon, Paul, my assistant, buzzed my intercom with a voice tight as wire. "Mr. Aldridge, your daughter and son are here. With their spouses. Security says they're refusing to leave." I set down my pen, glancing at the neat stacks of cancellation confirmations on my mahogany desk. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the face-to-face reckoning. "Send them up," I said calmly. "But Paul, if anyone raises their voice, call security immediately." The elevator dinged, and moments later the four of them poured into my office like a tide of panic, wrapped in designer clothes. Vanessa was first, her heels striking the hardwood like gunshots, her face flushed and streaked with mascara. Behind her came Nathan, pale and sweating, his tie loosened, his wife clutching his arm like a drowning woman. Vanessa's husband trailed after, expression stiff, as though he'd rather be anywhere else. "Dad." "What on earth are you doing?" Vanessa's voice cracked. My card was declined in front of the Hartwell Foundation board. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I leaned back in my leather chair, hands folded, letting them see the papers spread neatly in front of me. Letters from banks, insurance cancellations, trust freezes, evidence that this wasn't a tantrum. It was strategy. "Tell me about humiliation," Vanessa, I said evenly. "Like being told to get off the stage at my own company's anniversary, in front of the entire city." Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. For the first time in years, she seemed unsure of herself. Nathan jumped in, his voice shaking. "Dad, listen, we overreacted that night. You know how stress gets to us. But cutting off our guarantees, our insurance, our mortgages, this is insane. You can't just leave us stranded like this." "I can," I said, tapping the stack of termination papers. "And I have." Vanessa's tears flowed freely now, the same practiced tears I'd seen when she was 16 and wanted a new car. "Dad, please, think about the children. Their tuition, their medical care, it all depends on you. You can't just punish them for our mistakes." I stared at her. "My grandchildren are innocent, yes. But do you think I didn't notice Nathan scribbling notes about borrowing from their trust funds? You were already circling like vultures over their future. Don't talk to me about what's best for them." Nathan's wife, Rebecca, finally spoke, her voice breaking. "Mr. Aldridge, please, we didn't know how deep it all went. I thought Nathan's business was profitable. I thought we were independent. I swear I didn't know." Her words trailed off as Nathan shot her a sharp look. Silence settled, broken only by the ticking of my grandfather's clock on the wall. I let it stretch, forcing them to sit in the discomfort they had earned. Finally, I said, "For 30 years, I gave you everything. Harvard, Stanford homes in Cherry Creek and Boulder memberships at Fairway Hills. I bought your futures with my sweat and blood. And in return, I was told I had nothing meaningful to show for it, that I was an embarrassment." Vanessa straightened, her voice hardening through the tears. "So what, Dad? You're going to cut us off completely because of one mistake? Families forgive each other. That's what family does." I stood slowly, leaning on the desk, my eyes level with hers. "Families respect each other. Families don't humiliate their father in public. Families don't treat love like a debit card. Tell me, Vanessa, when was the last time you called me without needing money? When was the last time you invited me to dinner just because I was your father?" Her lips trembled. She had no answer. Nathan tried again, desperation in his tone. Dad, just give us another chance. We'll do better. We'll call more. We'll make it right. Just restore the accounts, and we'll prove it. I shook my head. You're not apologizing to me. You're apologizing to my wallet. The room went still. Vanessa's facade cracked, anger flashing through her tears. You'll regret this, she spat. When you're old and sick and alone, don't expect us to come running. You'll die alone in this house, you pathetic old man. Her words hung in the air like acid, but for the first time, they didn't pierce me. They only confirmed the truth I had finally accepted. I reached for the stack of papers, tapped them into order, and slid them into a leather folder. Then it's settled, I said calmly. You wanted independence from me. Now you have it. Signed, sealed, delivered. I pressed the intercom. Paul, please escort them out. As security approached, my children's voices rose in protest, but I no longer listened. I turned to the window, the Denver skyline glowing in the late afternoon sun, and let their words fade behind me. This was no longer their stage. It was mine again. Security arrived within minutes. 2 tall men in navy blazers, the kind of calm presence that could end an argument without raising a hand. Vanessa spun toward them, outrage written all over her face. You can't just throw us out, she shouted, her voice echoing off the paneled walls of my office. This is my father's building. I have every right to be here. The guard's voice was firm but polite. Ma'am, Mr. Aldridge has asked us to escort you and your party downstairs. Please cooperate. Nathan's face turned red. Dad, please, this isn't necessary. We can talk like adults, just give us 5 more minutes. I stayed standing behind my desk, my leather chair pushed aside like a throne no longer needed. The papers lay neatly stacked in front of me, visible proof of my resolve. This conversation is finished, I said. You wanted independence. Now you'll live it. Every dollar, every luxury, every safety net, it's gone. You'll stand on your own feet just like I once did. Vanessa's tears dried instantly, replaced by a sneer. You think this makes you powerful? You're just bitter. No one respects you anymore. You'll die alone, clinging to your buildings, at your paperwork. For a moment, the words hung there, sharp as broken glass. 10 years ago, even a year ago, they might have gutted me. But now they sounded hollow. I walked slowly around the desk, closing the distance between us, until I could see the fear behind her fury. Vanessa, I would rather die alone with my dignity than live surrounded by people who despise me but love my money. She flinched, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. She spun on her heel and stormed toward the door, her husband trailing behind like a shadow. The sound of her heels striking the marble floor echoed long after she was gone. Nathan remained, his wife Rebecca tugging at his sleeve. His eyes darted between the security guards and me, torn between pleading and pride. Dad, he said softly, you don't have to do this. We can change. Just give us time. I studied him for a long moment. My son, the boy I'd carried on my shoulders through Rocky's games, the man I had bankrolled through failure after failure. His voice trembled now, stripped of arrogance. For the first time in years, I saw not a confident entrepreneur, but a frightened child. You had 30 years of time, Nathan, I said. 30 years of chances, and every time I rescued you. But not this time. This time you'll rescue yourself. His shoulders sagged. Rebecca whispered, Please, Mr. Aldridge, the kids. They don't understand why Grandpa doesn't love them anymore. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. I do love them. That's why I'm teaching their parents to stand. If they don't, what kind of example will the children see? Nathan's jaw clenched. His pride won out. Without another word, he turned and walked out, his wife following with a last pleading glance over her shoulder. The guards fell into step behind them, their footsteps fading down the corridor until silence returned. I stood in the middle of my office, the Denver skyline glowing orange in the setting sun. The city I had built with my own hands, the company that bore my name, it all stood taller than the hollow words of ungrateful children. For a long time I simply breathed. Not the shallow, anxious breaths of a man waiting for the next demand, the next phone call, the next bailout. Deep, steady breaths of a man who had finally reclaimed his life. I returned to my desk, opened the leather folder, and signed the last set of documents, final terminations, of power of attorney removal, of beneficiaries cancellation, of every remaining tether. Each stroke of the pen felt like a hammer striking steel, forging freedom. When the final signature was done, I leaned back and closed my eyes. The storm had passed. The confrontation was over. And in its wake I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, peace. I whispered into the stillness as if Margaret were standing beside me again. It's done, my love. They can no longer use me. God gave me the strength to finish what I started. Outside, the Rockies loomed eternal, their peaks dusted with snow. Strong, unyielding, unmoved by storms. Tonight I felt like those mountains, weathered, scarred, but still standing, and stronger than ever. 6 weeks later, my mornings looked nothing like the old days. No more phone calls from bankers reminding me of payments my children had forgotten. No more panicked midnight texts asking for transfers labeled urgent. The silence that once felt heavy now sang like freedom. I sat on the back patio of my estate in Cherry Hills, the air fresh with the scent of pine drifting down from the Rockies. The sky stretched wide and blue, the kind of morning Margaret used to love. She would stand barefoot in the grass, coffee cup in hand, smiling at the mountains as though they belonged to us. Now I sat alone, but not lonely. The neighborhood children had taken to calling me Grandpa Lawrence. Emma and Jacob from next door often came running across the lawn, their sneakers leaving trails in the dew. That morning, Emma brought a shoebox tucked under her arm. "Uncle Lawrence," she said, breathless, "will you help us with our science project? We're building a model of the Denver skyline, and Mom says you're the expert." Her brown eyes sparkled with the kind of trust I hadn't seen in my own children in years. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. The skyline, huh? Well, I happen to know a thing or two about that. We spent the morning at my kitchen table, glue and cardboard scattered everywhere, little fingers smudged with marker ink. I taught them how to measure angles, how to balance weight, how to make sure their towers stood straight. You see, I told them steadying a cardboard skyscraper, a building is only strong if its foundation is solid. Without that, the whole thing collapses. Emma nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. Like people, right? They need strong foundations, too. Her words caught me off guard, but I smiled. Out of the mouths of children came truths sharper than any adult's wisdom. By afternoon, their parents, the Hendersons, joined us on the patio. Tom Henderson clapped me on the back. "You seem lighter these days, Lawrence." "Happier, I am," I admitted. I finally learned the difference between being loved and being used. They nodded knowingly. The Hendersons weren't wealthy, but they were genuine. They invited me for dinners where no one asked for checks, only for stories. Their kids drew me pictures and taped them to my fridge. When I helped them patch a leaky roof or fix a broken fence, they showed gratitude with homemade pies, not entitlement. It was simple, and it was enough. One evening, I found myself pulling out the safe deposit box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the papers for my will. I spread them out on the same mahogany desk that had once held Vanessa's credit card bills and Nathan's business loan statements. This time, the signatures I prepared weren't for bailouts, they were for legacy. I rewrote everything. The bulk of my estate would now go into a scholarship fund for children who couldn't dream of Harvard or Stanford without help. Kids who might cherish the opportunity more than my own ever had. My employees, the men and women who had built Aldridge Construction with their sweat, would each receive a share. The Henderson children would have trusts established for their education. And as for Vanessa and Nathan, their names vanished from the pages as though they had never existed there at all. When the lawyer slid the completed documents back into the folder, I felt the last chain slip free. Later that night, I stood on my patio again, the Rockies glowing pink in the fading sun. I thought of Margaret. We raised them, we loved them, we gave them everything. And then I thought of Emma's small hand slipping into mine earlier that day. Some families are born. Others are made. I realized I hadn't lost family at all. I had simply traded one kind for another. The sound of children's laughter drifted across the lawn. For the first time in decades, I felt like a man exactly where he was meant to be. Not a banker, not a savior, not an old man clinging to relevance. Just Lawrence Aldridge, free, dignified, and finally at peace. The Sunday morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of lilacs from the garden Margaret once planted. I sat on the patio with a cup of black coffee, the Rockies rising like eternal sentinels in the distance. My desk inside held a new will, signed and sealed, my fortune redirected towards scholarships, employees, and neighbors who had shown me loyalty. For once, my legacy felt honest, built not on obligation, but on love freely given. Emma came bounding across the lawn again, her little sneakers squeaking on the flagstones. In her hand, she clutched something small. "Uncle Lawrence," she said, holding it out. "I picked this for you." It was a single dandelion, its yellow petals bright against the morning light. I took it carefully, my calloused fingers closing around the fragile stem. For a moment, I just stared at it. A lifetime of luxury gifts had passed through these hands: diamonds, Rolex watches, imported cars bought for children who sneered behind my back. Yet this simple flower given freely with affection was worth more than all of it combined. "Thank you, Emma," I said softly, my voice catching. She smiled. "Mom says you're the nicest man in the neighborhood. You always help people. That's why you're our grandpa now." Her words hit me harder than Vanessa's cruelty ever could. Not because they hurt, but because they healed. After she skipped away, I leaned back in my chair, the flower resting gently on the table. I lifted my eyes to the mountains, the same mountains that had witnessed my rise, my humiliation, and now my renewal. "Lord," I whispered, "maybe you let me lose my children's love so I could discover something deeper. Family not of blood, but of choice. Thank you for closing one door and opening another." Peace washed over me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by what I had lost. I was grateful for what I had found. I realized then justice hadn't been about revenge. It wasn't about punishing Vanessa or Nathan. Justice had been refusing to let them use me any longer, refusing to trade dignity for counterfeit affection. Justice was finally saying no and meaning it. And in that no, I found my yes. Yes to freedom. Yes to dignity. Yes to the kind of love that asks for nothing but presence. I looked down at the dandelion again. Fragile. Ordinary. Yet radiant with meaning. Perhaps that was what God had been trying to show me all along, that the simplest gifts given in sincerity outshine all the treasures of the world. I turned toward the camera in my mind, the same one that captured my story here for you, and let myself smile. Sometimes, my friends, the family you choose is the only family you need. Sometimes God strips away false love so He can give you the real thing. I lost children who never valued me, but I gained peace, dignity, and a family of the heart. And I wouldn't trade that for all the mansions in Denver. I paused, the flower still in my hand, then leaned forward as though speaking directly to you. If this story touched you, share it with a friend who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story. And tell me in the comments, what does family mean to you, blood or love? I raised my cup of coffee in a silent toast to the mountains, to Margaret's memory, to the neighbors' laughter drifting across the lawn, and to the God who had turned humiliation into healing. For the first time in 72 years, I felt truly rich. And this time, no one could take it away.